Call security. She's trying to steal a car. The sentence didn't echo, it landed, heavy and deliberate, cutting through the polished silence of Monroe Elite Motors at exactly 11:42 a.m., where sunlight spilled across rows of six-figure vehicles and everything about the space whispered exclusivity until that moment shattered it. Alicia Monroe didn't flinch. She stood beside a midnight black luxury coupe priced just under $120,000, her fingers resting lightly against the cool metal, her outfit simple, dark jeans, a fitted grey tee, no jewelry, no signal of status, just presence, quiet and unshaken. Around her, the shift was immediate. A salesman named Trent adjusted his cufflinks and stepped closer, his smile thin, practiced, but hollow. "Those models are reserved for serious buyers," he said, his tone polite on the surface, dismissive underneath. Alicia's eyes moved slowly from the car to his face, steady, unreadable. She didn't answer. That silence lingered just long enough to make him uncomfortable. Across the showroom, another associate leaned toward a well-dressed couple, offering them bottled water, laughter, attention, everything Alicia had been denied since she walked in. It wasn't subtle. It never was. Near the reception desk, a young employee, Evan, barely mid-20s, watched the interaction unfold, his brow tightening, something about it not sitting right. He glanced at the system screen in front of him, then back at Alicia, like he was trying to connect pieces that didn't yet fit. But before anything could settle, the manager arrived. Victor Langley. Mid-40s, tailored suit, confidence sharpened by years of control. He didn't greet Alicia. He assessed her. One look. That was all it took. "We've had issues lately," he said, voice carrying just enough to draw attention, people coming in pretending to be customers. A few heads turned. A phone lifted quietly in the background. Alicia noticed. Of course she did. She had seen rooms turn like this before. The weight of assumption. The choreography of exclusion. But still, she didn't raise her voice. Didn't step back. Didn't explain. Victor continued, emboldened now. "If you're not here to purchase, I'm going to have to ask you to step away from the vehicles." His words hung in the air like policy, but his eyes said something else entirely. Alicia tilted her head slightly, not in confusion, but in recognition. This wasn't new. It never was. Years ago, she had stood in a different showroom, same tone, different faces, and left without saying a word. That version of her had walked out. This one stayed. Slowly, she reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone. No rush. No tension. Just precision. Trent scoffed under his breath. Victor folded his arms. Evan's eyes flicked back to the screen, then froze. Alicia raised the phone to her ear, her voice calm, measured, impossible to ignore. "This is Alicia," she said. A beat. "Initiate code black. Full showroom audit. Now." The air shifted. Subtle at first. Then undeniable. Evan's screen blinked. A new window opened. Authorization level, executive override. His breath caught. He looked up, this time not with doubt, but with realization forming fast. Victor frowned, stepping forward. "Who exactly do you think you're calling?" Alicia lowered the phone slowly, her gaze steady, her voice quieter now, but heavier. "Go ahead," she said. "Call security." The word security hung in the air longer than it should have, not because anyone moved to act, but because no one was quite sure what came next. Victor Langley let out a short breath, half laugh, half irritation, stepping closer with the kind of confidence that had never been challenged in this room. "You think a phone call changes anything?" he said, his voice lower now but sharper, meant only for her but heard by everyone nearby. Alicia did not respond. She did not need to. Her eyes moved past him, scanning the showroom like she was taking inventory of something far more important than cars. Across the polished floor, the couple who had been offered water earlier had gone quiet, their conversation replaced by curiosity. A man near the entrance slowly lifted his phone higher, no longer pretending he was not recording. The atmosphere was no longer controlled. It was shifting. Evan's screen flickered again, the system refreshing without his input, lines of data populating faster than he could process. His fingers hovered over the keyboard, unsure whether to intervene or simply watch. Then a label appeared that made his chest tighten. Ownership tier access. Not regional. Not corporate. Ownership. He blinked once, then again, as if the word might change. It did not. He looked up at Alicia, really looked this time, and something in her stillness finally made sense. Victor noticed the hesitation and turned sharply. "What is the problem?" he snapped. Evan hesitated, his voice catching slightly. "Sir, I think you should see this." Victor did not move. Not yet. Pride held him in place longer than logic. "There is nothing to see," he replied dismissively, turning back to Alicia. "Last chance. Either you step away from the vehicle, or we will have you escorted out." The sentence was clean, rehearsed, delivered like policy, but the tension underneath it was new. Alicia took a single step forward, closing the distance just enough to shift the balance of the conversation. Not aggressive. Not defensive. Intentional. Her voice, when it came, was calm, almost conversational. "You are very confident for someone who has not checked his own system." The words landed differently than anything before. Not louder. Just heavier. Victor's expression tightened, just for a second, before he masked it with a scoff. "We do not need a system to recognize a situation," he said. Behind him, Evan swallowed hard, eyes still locked on the screen. More windows were opening now. Internal audit request. Live recording enabled. Timestamps locking in. Every word, every action, being captured in real time. His heartbeat picked up. This was no longer a misunderstanding. This was documentation. "Sir," Evan tried again, quieter this time, almost urgent. Victor turned, irritation finally breaking through. "What?" Evan rotated the monitor slightly, enough for Victor to see. At first, Victor's expression did not change. Then it did. Subtle. Quick. But real. His eyes moved across the screen, reading faster than he wanted anyone to notice. The name. The authorization. The override. He looked back at Alicia, and for the first time since she walked in, he did not speak. Immediately. The silence that followed was different from before. It was not dismissal. It was calculation. Alicia held his gaze, unshaken, her posture unchanged, her presence now filling the space in a way that could no longer be ignored. Around them, the showroom had gone almost completely still. Conversations had stopped. Phones were no longer hidden. Every person in that room felt it. The moment before something irreversible. Alicia's phone buzzed once in her hand. She glanced at it briefly, then back at Victor. "It is already in motion," she said quietly. "The only question now is how far you want this to go." Victor did not step back, but something in his posture shifted, a fraction of an inch, barely visible unless you were looking for it, and now everyone was looking. The confidence that had filled the showroom minutes ago was thinning, replaced by something quieter, more fragile. He glanced again at the screen, then at Alicia, as if trying to reconcile the two realities standing in front of him. "This is a system error," he said finally, but the words did not carry the same weight they had before. They sounded rehearsed, not believed. Alicia tilted her head slightly, her expression unchanged, her voice steady. "Errors do not authorize full audits," she said. "People do." The sentence landed with precision. Behind the desk, Evan swallowed, his hands now resting flat against the counter as if to steady himself. More notifications appeared on the screen, each one louder than the last without making a sound. Compliance review initiated. Transaction history unlocked. Employee interaction logs flagged. It was no longer just about one moment. It was everything. Victor saw it. He understood it. And for the first time, he did not have control over it. A man near the entrance stepped closer, lowering his phone just enough to speak to the person beside him. "This is about to get serious," he whispered, not realizing his voice carried farther than intended. The couple who had been laughing earlier now stood still, their attention fully locked on Alicia. No one was browsing anymore. No one was shopping. The showroom had become something else entirely. Victor straightened his jacket, a reflex more than a decision, and forced a breath through his nose. "If there has been a misunderstanding," he began, his tone shifting, softer now, measured, "we can resolve this privately." Alicia's eyes held his without blinking. "You already made it public," she replied. No anger. No raised voice. Just truth, placed exactly where it needed to be. The words lingered, heavier than any accusation. Evan looked back at the screen, then again at Alicia, and this time he spoke without hesitation. "It is her," he said, his voice clearer now, cutting through the tension. Victor turned sharply. "What did you just say?" Evan did not look away. "Alicia Monroe," he continued, each word landing with growing certainty. "Founder. Chief Executive Officer. Full ownership authority." The room reacted before Victor did. A quiet ripple moved through the space, not loud, but undeniable. Phones lifted higher. Eyes widened. The narrative had shifted, and everyone felt it at once. Victor's mouth opened slightly, then closed again, his thoughts catching up too late to the moment. He looked at Alicia again, really looked this time, and saw what had been there all along. Not uncertainty. Not hesitation. Authority. Controlled. Absolute. Alicia took a slow breath, not because she needed it, but because the room did. "You evaluated me the second I walked in," she said, her voice still calm, still measured. "Not based on facts. Not based on information. Just assumption." She let the silence stretch just long enough for it to settle. "And now," she added quietly, "you are watching the result of that decision in real time." Victor's composure cracked, not loudly, not dramatically, but enough. His shoulders dropped a fraction. His certainty, gone. Around them, the showroom no longer belonged to him. It had not for several minutes. He just had not realized it yet. Alicia's phone buzzed again. This time, she did not look at it. She already knew what it meant. The system was not just watching anymore. It was responding. And there was no turning it off. The silence did not break all at once, it unraveled slowly, like something the room had been holding on to finally. Letting go. Victor stood there, no longer the center of authority but a man caught inside a moment he could not control, his eyes flicking between Alicia and the screen as if searching for a version of reality that still worked in his favor. "We can fix this," he said, quieter now, the edge gone from his voice, replaced by something closer to urgency. "Whatever this is, we can correct it." Alicia did not move. She did not soften. Her presence remained exactly the same, grounded, deliberate, untouched by the shift happening around her. "It was never broken," she said calmly. "You just revealed it." The word settled deep, heavier than anything said before. Behind the desk, Evan exhaled slowly, his eyes scanning line after line of system updates that were no longer subtle. Employee conduct review active. Client interaction discrepancies flagged. Priority escalation routed to executive oversight. This was not a local issue anymore. It had reached higher. Much higher. A notification blinked again, this time locking onto Victor's credentials. Access under review. Temporary restriction pending. Evan froze, then looked up instinctively, as if the screen had just spoken out loud. Victor noticed the pause. "What now?" he asked, but there was hesitation in his tone, something that had not existed minutes ago. Evan hesitated, then answered honestly. "Your access is being evaluated," he said. The sentence landed harder than any accusation could have. Victor blinked, once, then again, his jaw tightening as the reality of that sank in. Around them, the energy in the showroom had transformed completely. The customers were no longer observers. They were witnesses. A woman near the waiting area shook her head slowly, not in shock, but in recognition, like she had seen something like this before, just never watched it unfold this clearly. Another man lowered his phone just enough to whisper, "She gave them every chance." And that was the truth of it. Alicia had not raised her voice. She had not argued. She had not forced anything. She had simply let them reveal themselves. Alicia took a small step toward the center of the showroom, not to claim space, but because it was already hers. Her voice, when she spoke again, was steady, controlled, impossible to ignore. "Do you know how many reports came from this location in the last 6 months?" she asked, not looking at Victor now, but at the room itself. No one answered. They did not need to. 7, she said. 7 complaints. Same pattern. Same language. Same outcome. She paused just long enough for it to land. All dismissed. Victor opened his mouth, ready to respond, but stopped. Because he knew. Maybe not every detail. But enough. Enough to understand that this was not about one moment. It never was. Alicia turned her gaze back to him, calm but unmistakably firm. "You did not just misjudge me," she continued. "You repeated a system you never questioned." The statement was not loud, but it carried through every inch of the showroom. Evan looked down again as another update appeared. Compliance team connected. Live oversight initiated. The system was no longer just recording. It was preparing to act. Victor's shoulders dropped slightly, the weight of the situation finally settling in full. The control he thought he had was gone. Not taken. Lost. Alicia's phone vibrated once more in her hand. This time, she glanced at it briefly, then lifted her eyes again, her voice quieter now, but final. "This is the part," she said, "where everything changes." And no one in that room doubted it. Alicia did not raise her voice when she said it, but the weight of her words settled over the showroom like a final verdict that had been building long before she ever walked through those glass doors. No one moved. No one interrupted. Even the soft background music that had been playing moments ago felt distant, irrelevant now. Victor stood frozen, his mind racing for something to hold on to, some version of authority that still belonged to him, but there was nothing left to reach for. The system had already moved past him. Evan's screen lit up again, brighter this time, more decisive. A new notification appeared, larger than the rest. Executive directive received. He read it once, then again, just to be certain. His voice, when it came out, was quieter than before, but it carried across the room with unmistakable clarity. "Corporate has responded," he said. Alicia did not look surprised. She simply nodded once, as if this was exactly the sequence she had expected. "Read it," she said calmly. Evan hesitated for half a second, then followed the instruction. "Effective immediately, all flagged personnel at this location are placed under review pending termination authorization," he read, his voice steady but tight. The words echoed in the silence that followed. Flagged personnel. It was no longer about one person. It was a pattern, now exposed in full view. Victor shook his head slowly, disbelief mixing with something closer to fear. "This is an overreaction," he said, though the conviction behind it had already faded. Alicia turned to him, her expression unchanged, her tone even. "No," she said. "This is a response." The distinction mattered. Everyone in that room felt it. Another notification appeared. Access revoked. One by one, names began to populate on the screen, each tied to interactions, each tied to decisions that had seemed small at the time, routine even, but now stood out in sharp contrast under scrutiny. Trent, the salesman who had spoken first, glanced toward the desk, then back at Alicia, his confidence gone, replaced by a quiet uncertainty. He opened his mouth, as if to explain, but nothing came out. There was nothing left to explain. Alicia took a slow step forward, her gaze sweeping across the staff, not with anger, not with triumph, but with something far more controlled. Finality. Every system reflects the people who run it, she said, her voice measured, each word deliberate. And today, this system told the truth. The sentence did not accuse. It revealed. Victor exhaled sharply, running a hand across his face, the weight of the moment finally settling in. We followed protocol, he said, but even he seemed unsure of the words as he said them. Alicia met his gaze without hesitation. You followed assumption, she replied. That was the difference. That was everything. Behind them, the customers were no longer silent. A quiet murmur moved through the space, not chaotic, but certain. They had seen enough. They understood what had happened. Even if they had not known how to name it before. Evan looked down again as the final directive appeared, this one unmistakable. Termination authorization approved. Effective immediately. His breath caught for a moment before he spoke again. It is done, he said. Alicia nodded once more, then turned slightly, addressing the room, not just the staff, but everyone present. This dealership does not belong to bias, she said. It belongs to standards. She paused, letting the words settle. And today, those standards were enforced. No applause followed. None was needed. The silence itself carried more weight than any reaction could. Victor stood there, no longer in control, no longer certain, watching as everything he had assumed would hold simply, did not. Alicia glanced once more at the showroom, at the people, at the system that had just revealed itself under pressure, then shifted her gaze forward, her voice quieter now, but unmistakably resolute. We are not done, she said. And everyone knew she meant it. The word done did not end the moment, it expanded it, stretching across the showroom like a line that could not be crossed back over, and for a few seconds no one moved because they understood something irreversible had just taken place. Victor's shoulders remained lowered, his authority stripped not by force but by exposure, and he looked around as if searching for someone to restore the version of reality he had just lost, but no one stepped in, no one defended him, not even the employees who had stood behind him minutes ago. Trent shifted his weight uneasily, his earlier confidence gone, his eyes now fixed on the floor as if avoiding Alicia might somehow undo what had happened. Alicia stood exactly where she had been, her posture unchanged, her presence still calm but now unmistakably dominant, not because she demanded it, but because the truth had settled around her like something permanent. Evan's screen continued to update, line after line confirming what had already been spoken, system locks activating, credentials disappearing, access levels collapsing one by one, and he realized he was watching more than discipline, he was watching a structure being rebuilt in real time. A soft voice from the side broke the silence, one of the customers, a middle-aged man who had been standing near the entrance the entire time. So what happens now? He asked, not out of curiosity, but because the question mattered. Alicia turned slightly toward him, acknowledging not just him, but the entire room. Now we correct it, she said, her tone steady, clear, leaving no room for confusion. She took a slow step forward, moving past Victor without looking at him again, not dismissing him, but no longer needing to address him. Her focus had shifted beyond individuals, toward something larger. Evan, she said calmly. He straightened immediately. Yes. Keep the system open. Do not close anything. I want full visibility on every flagged interaction from this location over the last year. Evan nodded quickly, his fingers already moving. Yes, it is already pulling records. Alicia continued without pause. Tag every unresolved complaint and escalate them to priority review. No delays. No filters. Understood, Evan replied. Around them, the remaining staff stood still, uncertain, watching as instructions replaced assumption, as clarity replaced control. Alicia turned her attention to the room again, her voice carrying just enough to reach everyone without needing to rise. Every person who walked into this dealership expected fairness, she said. That is not optional. That is the baseline. A woman near the waiting area nodded slowly, her expression reflecting something deeper than agreement, something closer to relief. Alicia continued, her tone unwavering. What happened here today is not an isolated moment. It is a pattern. And patterns do not change unless someone is willing to stop them. She paused briefly, not for effect, but because the weight of the statement needed space. Today, we stopped it. Behind her, Victor finally spoke again, his voice lower, strained. Alicia, but the sentence did not finish. She did not turn. She did not acknowledge it. Not out of dismissal, but because the moment for explanation had passed. The system had already recorded everything that mattered. Evan's screen flashed. Again. External compliance team connected. On-site review initiated. Alicia glanced briefly at the update, then back at the room, her expression composed, her voice quiet but absolute. This location will be reviewed in full, she said. Every process, every decision, every standard. The words did not threaten. They defined. The showroom, once a place of polished surfaces and controlled narratives, now felt different, open, exposed, honest in a way it had not been before. Alicia took one final look across the space, at the people, at the system, at the moment that had unfolded exactly as it needed to, then spoke one last time, her voice steady, grounded in something far deeper than authority. Respect is not a privilege you give, she said. It is a standard you meet. And this time, no one in the room looked away. The room did not return to normal after her words, it settled into something new, something quieter but far more aware, as if every person inside Monroe Elite Motors understood they had just witnessed a line being drawn that would not be erased. Alicia remained at the center of it without trying to be, her presence no longer questioned, no longer interpreted, simply accepted for what it was. Evan's hands continued moving across the keyboard, pulling records, opening files that had been ignored, each entry telling a story that had never been fully acknowledged until now. There are more, he said under his breath, not intending to speak out loud, but the words carried anyway. Alicia turned slightly. How many? She asked. Evan swallowed as he scanned the data. 17 flagged interactions in the last 12 months, he replied, his voice tightening as he processed what he was seeing. Only 7 were reported. The rest were never filed. A quiet reaction moved through the room, not loud, not chaotic, but unmistakable. People were no longer surprised. They were recognizing something. Alicia nodded once, not shocked, not reactive, but confirming what she already suspected. That is how systems protect themselves, she said calmly. They hide what is inconvenient. She took a slow step forward again, her gaze moving across the remaining staff, not searching for guilt, but for understanding. And that is how they fail. Behind her, Victor stood still, his earlier authority replaced by something heavier, something that looked like realization, though it came too late to change anything. He spoke again, quieter this time, almost to himself. We were following what worked. Alicia heard him. She always heard everything. She turned just enough to respond, her voice steady, precise. It worked for who? The question did not demand an answer. It exposed the absence of one. Victor said nothing. He could not. Across the showroom, one of the customers stepped forward slightly, a woman who had been silent until now, her expression firm. I came here last year, she said, her voice clear. I was told the inventory I asked about was not available. I walked out and bought the same model somewhere else that same day. She paused, then added, now I understand why. Her words settled into the space like confirmation, not accusation, but truth finally spoken out loud. Alicia inclined her head slightly in acknowledgement, not interrupting, not controlling the moment, allowing it to unfold. Another man near the back nodded. Same thing happened to my brother, he said. Different location, same tone. The pattern was no longer abstract. It was visible, shared, undeniable. Evan looked at the screen again as another update appeared. Full compliance audit expanded to regional review. He let out a breath he did not realize he was holding. This was no longer contained. It was spreading. Alicia's phone buzzed again, a steady rhythm now, each vibration marking another layer of response activating beyond the room. She glanced at it briefly, then looked back up, her voice calm but carrying authority that no one questioned anymore. "This does not stop here," she said. "It cannot." She turned slightly, addressing both the staff and the customers, her tone clear and grounded. "Every location will be reviewed. Every complaint will be reopened. Every decision will be examined." There was no urgency in her voice, only certainty. Not to punish, she added, but to correct. The distinction mattered. It shifted the energy again, from reaction to intention. Evan nodded to himself as he continued working, understanding now that what he was part of was bigger than a single moment, bigger than a single showroom. It was change, structured and deliberate. Alicia took one final step, positioning herself where the entire room could see her clearly, not elevated, not distant, but fully present. "This company was built on standards," she said. "Not image. Not assumption. Standards." She paused, letting the word settle, letting it take root. "And standards do not adjust based on who walks through the door." The room held that silence again, but this time it was different. It was not tension. It was alignment. And for the first time since she walked in, Monroe Elite Motors felt like it was becoming what it was always supposed to be. For a moment, nothing new was said, but everything deepened, as if the weight of what had already been revealed was still settling into the walls, the glass, the polished floors that had witnessed more than they were ever meant to show. Alicia stood still, but her mind did not. It moved backward, not to escape the moment, but to understand it fully, to place it in the long line of moments that had led her here. Years earlier, she had walked into a different dealership, not as an owner, not as a name anyone recognized, just a young woman with a plan and a number she had worked for. She remembered the salesman glancing at her, then past her, then choosing not to engage at all. She remembered standing beside a car she could afford, being told it was already spoken for, only to watch someone else be offered the same vehicle minutes later. She remembered leaving without arguing, without raising her voice, carrying something heavier than disappointment. She carried clarity. Back then, she did not have the power to change the room. So she changed her direction instead. That memory did not hurt anymore. It anchored her. It reminded her why she never confused silence with acceptance, why she never ignored patterns just because they were common. The showroom around her returned slowly into focus, but it no longer felt like the same space. It felt exposed. Honest in a way it had never been designed to be. Evan's voice cut gently into the moment. "The records go back further," he said, almost cautiously, as if unsure how much truth the room could hold at once. Alicia turned slightly. "How far?" she asked. Evan swallowed, scrolling through archive data that had not been opened in years. 3 years, he said. There are entries marked resolved that were never actually reviewed. A quiet reaction moved again through the space, softer this time, but deeper. This was no longer about recent mistakes. This was history. Alicia nodded slowly, not surprised, but confirming a pattern that had already revealed itself. "Then we go back 3 years, she said. "Every file. Every case." Evan nodded immediately. "Yes." Behind them, one of the staff members, a woman who had remained silent until now, spoke hesitantly. "Some of those reports were redirected," she admitted, her voice uncertain but honest. "We were told not to escalate unless it met certain criteria." Alicia turned to her, not sharply, not accusingly, but with focus. "And who defined that criteria?" she asked. The woman glanced briefly toward Victor, then back at Alicia. She did not answer out loud. She did not need to. The room understood. Alicia exhaled slowly, not out of frustration, but out of recognition. Systems did not create themselves. They were shaped, maintained, reinforced. "That ends today," she said quietly. The words did not rise. They settled. Across the showroom, the customers remained still, but their presence felt different now, less like observers and more like participants in something larger than a single visit. Alicia's gaze moved across them briefly, acknowledging without breaking the flow of what was unfolding. Her phone vibrated again, another confirmation, another layer of response activating beyond the walls of this building. She glanced down for just a second, then lifted her eyes again, grounded, certain. "Compliance has expanded the audit to include training protocols," she said, more to Evan than anyone else. "I want every onboarding process reviewed. Every guideline rewritten if necessary." Evan nodded, already typing. "Understood." Alicia stepped slightly to the side, giving space not to retreat, but to allow the process to continue without obstruction. Her voice, when it came again, was softer now, but no less firm. "What happened here was not sudden," she said. "It was built over time." She let that settle, then added, "which means it can be rebuilt." The distinction mattered. It shifted the moment from exposure to direction. From what was wrong to what would be made right. Victor stood where he was, listening now, not leading, not interrupting, just present in a way he had not been before. The showroom remained quiet, but it was no longer the silence of avoidance. It was the silence of understanding. And in that stillness, Alicia Monroe did not need to raise her voice to be heard. She had already become the point of truth the entire room now revolved around. Alicia did not rush the moment forward, she allowed it to unfold with intention, because what came next was not about reaction, it was about structure, and structure required clarity. The showroom remained still, but no longer uncertain, no longer divided, every person inside now aligned around a single undeniable truth that had been revealed piece by piece. Evan's screen continued to populate with data, lines of past interactions forming a pattern that could no longer be ignored or dismissed. "There is a tagging system," he said carefully, his voice steady but edged with concern. Alicia turned slightly. "Explain," she said. Evan hesitated for a fraction of a second, then continued. "Certain clients were marked internally," he said. "Not officially, not in the main system, but in notes attached to profiles. Indicators that affected how staff approached them." The room reacted again, quieter this time, but heavier. This was not assumption anymore. This was design. Alicia's expression did not change, but her eyes sharpened, focused, precise. "What kind of indicators?" she asked. Evan scrolled, then read directly from the screen. "High risk. Time-consuming. Low-priority engagement." He stopped there, but the implication was already clear. Alicia let a breath pass, not out of frustration, but out of recognition. "And those labels," she said calmly. "Who assigned them?" Evan looked down again, cross-referencing the data. "They were added manually," he said. "Multiple users, but all approved at management level." The answer did not need further explanation. Victor shifted slightly behind her, the weight of those words settling in a way nothing else had before. This was no longer about tone or behavior. It was documented bias, structured into the system itself. Alicia turned slowly, not toward Victor alone, but toward the entire staff. "You created a filter," she said. "And then you trusted it more than the people standing in front of you." No one spoke. No one interrupted. The truth did not leave space for defense. Across the showroom, one of the customers shook his head slowly. "That explains a lot," he said under his breath, not realizing he had spoken out loud. Another nodded beside him. The pattern was connecting beyond the staff now. Alicia took a step closer to the desk, her presence quiet but commanding. "Remove every tag," she said to Evan. "Immediately." Evan nodded without hesitation. "Yes." His fingers moved quickly, deleting entries one by one, watching as years of silent categorization disappeared from the system in real time. Alicia continued, her voice steady. "And flag every account that was labeled. I want direct outreach. Personal. Not automated. Understood, Evan replied. Behind her, the staff remained still, absorbing what they were seeing, not just consequences, but correction happening in front of them. Alicia's phone buzzed again, and this time she answered without stepping away. Alicia, she said simply. A voice on the other end responded, calm and professional. She listened for a moment, then nodded slightly. Expand it, she said. Include all branches. Same criteria. She ended the call and looked up again, her expression unchanged but her direction clear. This is not isolated, she said. So the response will not be either. The statement moved through the room like a quiet confirmation of scale. This was bigger than anyone inside had prepared for. Evan's screen refreshed again. Regional data syncing. System-wide audit in progress. He leaned back slightly, almost in disbelief at how quickly everything was shifting. Alicia looked across the showroom one more time, her voice calm, but final in its authority. You did not just decide who mattered, she said. You built a system that made that decision for you. She paused briefly, then added, and today, that system answers to me. The room held that silence again, but this time it was different. It was not tension. It was accountability settling into place, where it would stay. The system did not slow down, it accelerated, as if once the truth had been unlocked it refused to be contained again, and Evan watched it happen in real time, lines of data connecting across locations, patterns surfacing that had been buried under routine for far too long. It is spreading, he said quietly, almost to himself, but Alicia heard him. She always did. Good, she replied, her voice calm, grounded, certain. It means we are not too late. The showroom felt different now, not just exposed, but redefined, like the space itself was adjusting to a new standard being set inside it. Victor remained still, but his silence was no longer resistance, it was realization settling in, heavy and unavoidable. He looked at the desk, at the screen, at the people who had once followed his lead without question, and for the first time he understood that leadership had never been about control, it had been about responsibility, and he had failed it. Alicia stepped slightly forward, positioning herself where every person in the room could see her clearly, not elevated, not distant, but present in a way that demanded attention without asking for it. This is where most companies stop, she said, her voice steady, carrying across the room without effort. They identify the problem. They issue a statement. And then they move on. She paused just long enough for the words to settle. We are not most companies. The distinction landed with weight. Evan glanced up briefly, then back at the screen as another update appeared. Policy override authorized. Immediate reform protocol available. His hands hovered for a second, waiting. Alicia nodded once. Open it, she said. Evan complied instantly, the interface shifting. Again, revealing a framework that had been designed for moments exactly like this, but rarely used. Alicia continued, her tone precise, each word intentional. Effective immediately, all customer engagement protocols are suspended at this location until they are reviewed and rewritten. A quiet reaction moved through the staff, not loud, but undeniable. This was not temporary. This was structural. Every interaction from this point forward, she added, is observed, documented, and evaluated under new standards. Evan typed quickly, activating each directive as she spoke. Yes. Alicia turned slightly, her gaze moving across the remaining employees, not searching for agreement, but ensuring understanding. If you remain here, she said, you will meet those standards. Not interpret them. Not adjust them. Meet them. No one responded. They did not need to. The expectation was clear. Across the showroom, one of the customers spoke again, this time with something closer to respect than curiosity. You are not just fixing this place, he said. You are changing it. Alicia looked at him briefly, then nodded once. That is the point, she replied. She did not elaborate. She did not need to. Her phone buzzed again, and this time she placed it on the counter in front of her, the screen lighting up with incoming confirmations, compliance teams mobilizing, regional directors responding, a network of accountability activating far beyond the walls of this building. Evan looked at the screen, then at Alicia, a realization forming clearly now. This was planned, he said, not as a question, but as understanding. Alicia met his gaze, her expression calm, unshaken. No, she said. This was necessary. The difference mattered. It reframed everything. Victor exhaled slowly, the last of his resistance fading into something quieter, something closer to acceptance. Around them, the showroom no longer felt like a place where assumptions could survive. It felt like a place where they had been exposed, examined, and removed. Alicia stepped back slightly, not retreating, but allowing the system to continue its work without obstruction. Her voice, when she spoke again, was softer now, but no less firm. We do not rebuild by ignoring what was broken, she said. We rebuild by confronting it completely. The room held that truth in silence, not because it was forced, but because it was understood. And in that understanding, Monroe Elite Motors was no longer the same place it had been an hour ago. It had been changed, not by force, not by volume, but by clarity, and that clarity was not going anywhere. The shift was no longer subtle, it was complete, and everyone in the showroom felt it, not as pressure, but as clarity settling into place where confusion used to live. Alicia stood with the same calm presence she had carried from the moment she walked in, but now there was no question about who she was or what she represented. The system behind her continued to move, not loudly, not dramatically, but with precision, executing every directive that had been set in motion. Evan's screen updated again, and this time he did not hesitate before speaking. Regional directors are joining the audit, he said, his voice steady, but carrying the weight of what that meant. Alicia nodded once. Good, she replied. They need to see it exactly as it is. She stepped slightly to the side, giving a clear line of sight to the screen, not to expose anyone further, but to make sure nothing was hidden anymore. Transparency was no longer optional. It was the standard. Behind her, one of the remaining staff members spoke carefully, his voice uncertain but sincere. Is there anything we can do to fix this? He asked. It was the first time someone had asked a question that was not defensive, not dismissive, but accountable. Alicia turned toward him, her expression steady, not softened, but fair. Yes, she said. Start by understanding that this is not about one moment. It is about every moment that led to it. The answer did not offer comfort. It offered direction. The employee nodded slowly, absorbing the meaning behind her words. Across the showroom, the customers remained present, no longer shifting or whispering, but watching with a sense of quiet respect that had replaced earlier curiosity. They were no longer just witnessing a situation. They were witnessing a standard being enforced in real time. Alicia's phone buzzed again, but she did not reach for it immediately. She allowed the moment to hold, to settle, before acknowledging it. When she finally glanced down, her expression did not change, but her next words carried finality. Corporate has finalized the response, she said. Evan looked up instantly. What is the directive? He asked. Alicia met his gaze, then spoke clearly, without hesitation. All management roles at this location are terminated, effective immediately. The words landed clean, without force, but with absolute certainty. Victor closed his eyes briefly, not in protest, not in denial, but in recognition. The decision had been made long before it was spoken. Alicia continued, her tone unchanged. Interim leadership will be assigned from compliance until a full review is completed. Evan nodded quickly, entering the directive into the system as it came through. Around them, the remaining staff stood still, processing what had just been said, not reacting outwardly, but understanding inwardly that the structure they had known no longer existed. Alicia took a slow breath, not out of tension, but to mark the transition. This is not about removal, she said. It is about reset. The distinction mattered. It reframed the outcome, not as punishment, but as correction. A customer near the front nodded slightly, his voice low but clear. "That is how it should be done," he said. Alicia acknowledged him with a brief glance, then returned her focus to the room as a whole. "From this point forward," she said, "this location operates under direct oversight until every process reflects the standard it was built on. No one questioned it. No one challenged it. There was nothing left to argue. The system had spoken. The truth had been seen." Alicia stepped back once more, allowing the space to adjust around the new reality that had been established. Her voice, when she spoke again, was quieter now, but carried further than anything said before. "Respect is not something we announce," she said. "It is something we demonstrate, consistently, without exception." The showroom held that silence again, but now it was different. It was no longer waiting for what would happen next. It was accepting what had already been set into motion, knowing it would not be undone. The decision did not echo, it settled, firm and irreversible, and for a brief moment the entire showroom seemed to pause as if adjusting to a reality that had just rewritten itself in real time. No one questioned the directive. No one asked for clarification. The authority behind it was no longer abstract. It was present, visible, undeniable. Victor stood still, his role no longer defined by title or position, but by the consequences that had followed his decisions. He did not argue. He did not defend himself. He simply stood there, absorbing what had already been set into motion long before he realized it was out of his control. Alicia did not look at him again. Not out of dismissal, but because the focus had already shifted beyond individuals and into something far more important. Structure. Accountability. Continuity. Evan's screen continued to move, system confirmations stacking one after another, each one locking in a change that could not be reversed by opinion or explanation. "Interim leadership assigned," he said quietly. "Compliance officers are en route." Alicia nodded once, acknowledging the update without breaking her composure. Around them, the remaining staff began to shift slightly, not in panic, but in awareness, as if they were recalibrating their understanding of what it meant to stand in that space. One of them, the same woman who had spoken earlier, stepped forward just enough to be heard. "What happens to the rest of us?" she asked, her voice steady but careful. Alicia turned to her, her expression measured, direct. "You stay," she said. "If you are willing to meet the standard." The answer was simple, but it carried weight. It did not promise comfort. It required commitment. The woman nodded slowly, understanding the condition behind the opportunity. Across the showroom, the customers remained present, but their energy had shifted again, no longer tense, no longer uncertain, but grounded in something that resembled respect. Not for the situation, but for the way it had been handled. Alicia took a step toward the center once more, her presence anchoring the room as everything else adjusted around her. "This location reopens under review," she said clearly. "Operations continue, but every interaction is observed." Evan confirmed immediately. "Monitoring active," he said. Alicia continued without pause. "Every customer who walks in today will be treated the same. No assumptions. No shortcuts. No exceptions." The words were not loud, but they carried through the entire showroom with clarity that did not need volume. A man near the entrance gave a small nod, almost to himself, as if recognizing something that had been missing before. Alicia's phone buzzed again, but this time she silenced it without looking. The external world could wait. What mattered was already happening here. She turned her attention back to the staff, her voice quieter now, but more focused than ever. "This is not a punishment," she said. "It is a correction." She let that distinction settle fully before continuing. "And corrections only work if they are sustained." Evan glanced at the screen again as another update appeared. Customer outreach queue initiated. Past clients flagged for direct contact. He nodded slightly, understanding that this was not just about internal change, but external repair. Alicia took a final look around the showroom, her gaze steady, deliberate, taking in every person, every detail, every shift that had occurred in the last hour. The space no longer felt like it had when she entered. It was no longer defined by assumption. It was defined by awareness. She spoke one last time, her voice calm, grounded in something that did not need reinforcement. "What you saw today was not power," she said. It was accountability. The distinction mattered. It always had. And as the system continued to run, as the new structure took hold, as the people inside that showroom adjusted to a standard that would no longer bend, one thing became clear to everyone present. This was not the end of a moment. It was the beginning of a different way forward. 3 months later, the showroom still looked the same at first glance, the same polished floors, the same rows of precision-engineered vehicles, the same sunlight stretching across glass and chrome, but nothing about it felt the same once you stepped inside. The silence that used to carry judgment now carried intention. Every movement behind the desk was deliberate. Every greeting was consistent. Every interaction followed a standard that no longer shifted based on who walked through the door. Alicia Monroe stood near the entrance, not announced, not escorted, just present, observing without interrupting. No one rushed to her. No one changed their behavior because of her presence. That was the point. A young sales associate greeted a customer walking in, voice steady, tone respectful, offering assistance without assumption. Across the room, another employee walked a client through options, explaining features without rushing, without redirecting, without filtering. It was not performance. It was practice. Alicia watched quietly, her eyes moving from one interaction to another, not searching for flaws, but confirming alignment. Behind the desk, Evan, now officially assigned as interim operations lead, monitored the system, not with tension, but with focus. The interface looked different now, stripped of hidden tags, stripped of internal shortcuts, rebuilt around transparency. Every interaction logged. Every decision visible. Every outcome traceable. He noticed Alicia and gave a small nod, not formal, not performative, just acknowledgement. She returned it the same way. No words needed. The system had become what it was supposed to be. On the wall behind the reception desk, a simple statement had been installed, not large, not decorative, but impossible to ignore. Every customer is the standard. No exceptions. It was not branding. It was a reminder. Alicia stepped further into the showroom, her presence still calm, still grounded, her voice quiet when she finally spoke, directed not at one person, but at the space itself. "This is what it looks like when a system reflects its values," she said. No one stopped working. No one gathered around. The work continued, because that was the measure now, not the moment, but the consistency. A customer near the front desk glanced toward her, recognizing her not by announcement, but by understanding. "It feels different in here," he said. Alicia looked at him briefly and nodded. "It should," she replied. That was enough. Across the country, the impact had already spread. Every location reviewed. Every complaint reopened. Every manager retrained or replaced. What started in one showroom had become a company-wide correction, not driven by pressure, not driven by image, but by a decision to align action with principle. Back in the showroom, Alicia paused one last time, her eyes taking in the space that had once revealed everything wrong and now quietly demonstrated everything right. She did not smile. She did not celebrate. She simply stood there, present in the result of a system that had been forced to confront itself and choose differently. Her voice, when it came again, was soft, but carried with it the weight of everything that had changed. "I did not need to announce who I was," she said. "The system did that for me." She let the word settle, not as a conclusion, but as a truth that no longer needed to be proven. Then she turned and walked toward the exit, not because the work was finished, but because it was now being done correctly without her having to stand in the middle of it. And as the doors closed behind her, Monroe Elite Motors did not return to what it was before. It moved forward, defined not by the moment it failed, but by the moment it chose to be better.